Schroders has been working with defined contribution plans around the world, and we found that when we were working with these plans and providing solutions for some of their issues, actually the problems that they were facing weren't just local, they were actually global. And so we thought that there would be some key learnings that we could bring from the different defined contribution plans to other defined contribution plans in other parts of the world. We've done quite a lot of research at Schroders to identify how much we think individuals should save into their DC plan. And we think that people on average should save around 15% per annum, and that's assuming that they get a return of about 3% above inflation over a 40-year period. Now, that's reasonable for most members. It might be slightly different for those who are slightly lower or higher paid, but actually it's quite a good average for most members in a defined contribution plan. Auto-escalation is a concept that's quite common in defined contribution plans in the US, but not very common in other places around the world. And what happens is an individual's contributions are increased each year or increased when they get a pay rise, so that the individual doesn't realise that they're actually saving more than they originally thought. Auto-escalation is quite a good idea for young people who feel that they can't afford higher contributions when they first start saving into a defined contribution plan. But the problem with saving more later is that actually your assets then don't benefit from the good real return rates that you might get. So we find when we do our analysis that actually people are better off saving more earlier rather than more later. If you have a defined contribution plan with a compulsory contribution rate, what you need is a default fund for individuals to save their contributions into. Now, most individuals are not that interested in pensions, and so what you find is they are not engaged and they are apathetic about their pension for most of their life. So for this reason, the choice of the default fund is really important. And in our view, that default fund should target a return above inflation. And the reason for that is individuals, when they get to retirement, the types of things they're going to need to buy are going to rise with inflation. So it makes sense to us that individuals should get a return on their assets that also rises with inflation, because the things they're going to need to buy will rise with inflation. We think volatility is a real concern for DC members, particularly as they get towards retirement, because as an individual has been saving for many years, his or her retirement account can be quite large. And if they suffer very large losses just before retirement, they won't have enough time to make up that difference. What happens is that an individual either has to retire on a pension lower than they wanted to retire on, or they have to defer when they retire. There are a number of ways to manage volatility in a defined contribution plan. One of the ways is to invest in diversified assets, because if you invest in lots of different types of assets, you actually can get a much more smooth return, and you end up with less of the big losses that you would get from just investing in equities. And also, as an individual gets close to retirement, you can start to use downside risk management tools to manage some of that volatility. When Schroders has been working with defined contribution plans around the world, we noticed that very few of them outside of Australia and the United Kingdom actually use diversification. Most are invested in just domestic equities, and this can cause really big problems with volatility for individual members invested in those funds. We've noticed when we're working with different defined contribution plans around the world that people actually do different things with their money once they get to retirement. Some are forced to buy an annuity, such as in the UK. Some are provided with cash, such as in Hong Kong, and they can choose to spend that how they like. And in the US, for example, people are given assets that they then can invest in any fund they like. When members get to retirement, we don't think they should be forced to do something particular with their money. In the UK, where individuals are forced to buy an annuity, we think that this doesn't make sense, because some people are very reliant on their DC assets and some are less reliant. So it doesn't seem sensible to us that they should all have to buy the same thing. So we think that members should have something flexible, and they should ideally invest in a return-seeking fund, one that provides a return slightly above inflation but lower risk than what they were invested in just before they reached retirement. We found in basically all of the countries we've been working with in defined contribution that members are not very engaged with their pension. They often don't know how much they've saved, they don't know what they've been invested in, and they often don't know what to do when they actually get to retirement. So for this reason, in our opinion, we think it's really important that fiduciaries help members with the right investment choice.